All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kimberly Qualls with the Kansas Association of Counties. I'm the Education and Communications Director here, so I want to welcome you. And I felt really bad because I have a really bad memory about remembering to do this at the start of each of these calls. So, not that you don't know who I am, but I just wanted to make it official for you. So, thank you, everyone, for taking the time to join us this afternoon for our presentation. And I'm sorry, bear with me because I just lost. Oh, okay. Well, there we go. So Aaron's got it up. It's incorporating AI into local government service. Its practical and ethical considerations. And I wanted to mention that today's presenter are Aaron Davis, who's with Wichita State University, and he's got a long title. He'll probably tell us what more it is. But and we've also got Tatiana Lynn, who is with the Kansas Health Institute, and these are both great partners with Kansas Counties and KAC. And this is a repeat performance with some tweaks. So if you did attend at the 2023 KAC conference, don't worry, you're going to get some new stuff as well, which thank you, Aaron and Tatiana, for providing that. As well, for today's call, you've heard it's being recorded. That way we can share it out to those who could not attend, and or you can share it within your counties. And that information, the recording link and the PowerPoint presentation will be available in tomorrow's Kansas County Happenings newsletter. And then also, since we are on the Zoom meeting as opposed to the webinar, if you could go ahead and type any questions you may have in the chat box, that would be great. Aaron and Tatiana will actually answer the questions at the end because they do have a presentation chock full of great information. So we'll kind of save the questions to the end, but go ahead and type them throughout today's meeting so that we can get those addressed. And I think that's it. So with that, I'm going to turn the proverbial mic over to Aaron and Tatiana, and we're going to hear all things AI.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Kim. And yeah, there has been a lot of changes. Tatiana and I have been doing presentations, webinars, workshops, all sorts of things, probably since August. And we continually have to update things because it's always changing and there's always more things we're learning about what's interesting people. So a lot of repeat in terms of the concepts from KAC, but definitely some new material and things to look at. So as Kim mentioned, we can jump in, introduce ourselves really quick a little bit more. Aaron Davis with the Community Engagement Institute at Wichita State. I am a center director here, and I've been with WSU for about 10 years. That's probably all you need to know about me, other than I'm obsessed with AI and specifically ChatGPT, and I've already used it 3 times since we logged on here. So, Tatiana.
Aaron, Tatiana Lynn. Excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation to Kim and being a part of that series with Aaron. I am a director of business strategy and innovation at the Kansas Health Institute, and I really enjoy learning this new tool, and I feel in the power of it to help our workforce to be more efficient and effective, and really figuring out how we can leverage it, and so we can disseminate those learnings to you all and learn from you as well as you're using it.
Right. We want to engage you all for a second. If you would humor us a little bit in the chat box, and maybe you already do some of this so you can share, but if you could use artificial intelligence today to help in your county's work, finish this sentence. I would use it to what? I don't know if anyone has thought much about how they might be able to get some assistance, or you can note that too. We'd be curious to know who's using it in what ways. I think one of the best things that Tatiana and I do is actually get folks to share about AI and their experiences. Writing code, checking grammar, data entry of historical documents, frontline resources, respond to complaints. I assume that's like the text that you would use to respond. Help customers. All right, predictive modeling. I think we're going to want to definitely talk more about that. Focus group transcription. All right. These are really good examples. Some of them can be done with some simple tools, and we are going to talk about ChatGPT some today, and then some of these will also be more complex. And I think one of the reasons to talk about AI a lot right now is because, as many of you are probably seeing, it's growing, and pretty soon it will be everywhere. So we need to understand what that means and how we interact with it. So keep those ideas coming in the chat, but I know we have a lot of ground to cover. So do you have anything else, Tatiana, or should we jump in and get started? All right. So quick outline, we are going to keep things, like I mentioned, high level. We're going to talk kind of at a basis of what is AI. Then we want to talk about how we can use it in local government. And we're really thinking about some of those one-on-one or the day-to-day operational elements. And of course, knowing about all of this, we got to think about ethical, legal considerations, and then talk a little bit about what's to come and how to prepare. As I mentioned, there's new stuff happening every day. Tatiana and I are always sharing articles. We just learned about some new federal guidelines that are coming out in terms of how the federal government is wanting to start looking at how federal agencies are using AI. And that includes hiring some AI officers in all these different departments. So if we have time, we'll touch a little bit more on that. But let's go ahead and jump in. Starting off, what is artificial intelligence? So starting kind of at the beginning, in its simplest terms, AI is a set of tools and techniques kind of through computer coding that help computers learn from data. It helps them make decisions, improve over time. It doesn't think like a human, right? But it does mimic the way humans think. And that's really why and how it's put together. And that's why it's so interesting. So when we think about a Google search, you type words in, Google will go out and, well, I say this is the way it used to work, right? Google's working with AI as well. They would go find websites that show those exact words. AI is much different. It can actually understand what you're looking for, generate new responses by understanding the content that it can find on the internet. So it's really taking those elements and doing a lot more with it, again, mimicking the way humans think. If you were on early, Kim was mentioning there's machine learning, and there's a couple of other concepts we could get into. And if we have time at the end, we can do that if people are curious. But definitely, we're talking today kind of about AI as a higher concept. And then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into some specific language models like ChatGPT. So ChatGPT is considered a chat bot. So its real skill is being able to use language that we put into it and that it could go draw from its resources and basically have a conversation. So it uses those algorithms to go out, find, understand, reorganize, and bring stuff to us. So we use it a lot for brainstorming. We're going to get into some of these things because it can actually go out in its kind of network of information and put things together and bring them back to us. So AI is the broader term. There is some overlap when we talk about ChatGPT because it's built on the concept of artificial intelligence. The biggest difference is ChatGPT is very specific into being able to understand and focus on language. There are definitely, as I'm sure many of you know by now in the news, there's AI that focuses on visuals and images as well as audio. So I think we're just going to see more and more coming out. But so when we talk about AI, it's the big concept, and ChatGPT is just one of many tools specifically dedicated to language. AI is in our everyday lives, and it is becoming more and more prominent. So we're not going to be able to get away from it. I think that's where we need to really understand it so that we can embrace it. Often when we talk about AI right now, I think 2 years from now, you'll look back and be like, why were they even telling us about this? It's new, it's revolutionary. We compare it to moving from a typewriter to a computer. It is going to drastically change how we operate. Then there's also the aspect of what happened when we jumped on with the internet. Lots of scary things, and there are some bad things on the internet, but it revolutionized how we think, how we work. And AI is going to be very much the same. It is the next big thing that is going to revolutionize how we work. You've probably seen this a lot. We know that different companies are signing on to AI. Amazon Alexa used to just specifically, when you'd ask a question, it would go look through a database, right, looking for specific words. Now it's actually comprehending and understanding what you're asking and can create diverse responses. So if you use any of those Alexa devices, like you're engaging with AI. We know that Microsoft is all in. They've added AI to their Bing searches. They've also added Copilot. If anyone's had a chance to use that, we haven't. The university won't let us yet. I think they're worried about students. But when it comes to Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, you're going to be able to highlight all these things and ask questions. And basically, instead of just putting things in the software, you're going to be able to have conversations and build understanding inside of documents and pull things in that you never were able to do before. Photoshop is a really good example. They have some different materials that can actually help develop whole products. So documents, visuals, content in terms of the words and language. There's a lot of really neat things that some of these software companies are doing to try to make things faster and easier. We're going to talk about some of the implications with that. Really, everywhere you turn around, you're going to be running into AI. It's in our phones when the thing pops up and makes recommendations on things. That's often AI-based. Emails, where Microsoft is certainly using AI to help filter spam emails and other things coming in. Google is doing this as well. Streaming services, it's not just, oh, this person liked this, you might like it too because you like the same thing. They're getting really good in terms of analyzing, watching habits, and figuring out what recommendations to make. Navigation apps are very much the same. They're always, it's not just from route A to point A to point B like it used to be. They're now actually in real time gathering information, looking at traffic, making all these decisions and giving you pop-ups and telling you these things. So navigation has come a long way because of AI. And of course, smart home devices. I know mine's just a basic programmable one, so I can tell it, from 8 to 5 when I'm out, lower the temperature. But now they're getting smart to understanding when people are in the house, what types of things are happening. When you're changing things, it'll make recommendations. There's a lot more happening with home automation, incorporating AI to assist us to understand how to use these things better.
Thank you, Erin. And now I'm going to take you through a discussion a little bit more about ChatGPT specifically and what it can be used for. And so, as Erin mentioned, ChatGPT is OpenAI product, and it is our artificial intelligence language model. One thing to keep in mind about that this model is trained on information that's available in internet and other sources. And it doesn't retrieve information real time, so it's just as current as the update is. And they do update it pretty current. The most important version that's available right now is version 4. So what type of tasks? And probably this task that you see here on the screen that ChatGPT can do, similar to the ones you posted in the comments when we were asked your question, what it can be used for. So it can be used for generating information and also for changing information or updating the information. So for example, if you input some information or parameters about what type of job description you would like to craft, put some roles and describe your request. It will pull out a sample job description for you. And then you can also ask it a question about who would likely to apply for this job description. So it will also suggest, based on its kind of training, what type of individuals might apply for the job descriptions as you provided. ChatGPT can also be used for reviewing and proofreading information. So it can look at the grammar, it can find punctuation mistakes, it can also make information more concise, so it can really work with the text to make changes. It can make it more plain, so some things that are more technical can be asked to put it in plain language, and you can even request it at a certain grade level. One other feature of ChatGPT generally is translating documents in other languages, and it does a pretty decent job. Of course, we do need to have local experts who are native speakers to verify it, but it can produce that in a quick format. Another thing is really serving as the sounding board. So if you pull their different options and you ask potential benefits and pro and cons of each option. It will suggest a list for each option to consider. There is some pieces of that can really lead to innovation, because even at an individual level, there is something that ChatGPT will generate that not necessarily individuals thought about. So it can be a different angle. So what are some benefits? There are several benefits. Just here, 3 top benefits I want to highlight is save time and improve efficiency. It is producing information very fast within the several seconds that humans can do, and it can really free time to do some more complex tasks that require kind of human oversight and human intelligence to do those tasks. So it will create some efficiencies. It is available 24/7, so it's like a personal assistant that you have. It also can be in any device without any constraints. There is a paid version, but there is also a free version. And you kind of touch a little bit on the innovation. It can really suggest additional solutions or additional angles and ways to look at it, because it was trained on a lot of information available on internet, and brings this up when it suggests different approaches.
Real quick, just to jump in with a quick story. We had a meeting coming up. We were planning for a big anniversary, like organizational anniversary party. And I just put a bunch of stuff in ChatGPT, got a list of like 25 really innovative ideas of what we could do for this event. I didn't share it with anyone because I'm kind of like that AI guy. And then sure enough, at the end of our meeting, it was like a dozen people in 90 minutes. We came up with almost the exact same list. So had we just started with that, it's a good example of how it can give you something to go off of, so that you're not just kind of spinning your wheels and coming up with some of the same things.
Thanks, Erin. And then some of the considerations that will be helpful to keep in mind. Accuracy is one of them. ChatGPT, because it is based on a lot of information and data that's available on internet, that's because as a result, it can produce some information might be not quite accurate. So it's really important to make sure that you do that spot checking, that you use expertise or tap into expertise of others, or go to original source to double check the information, especially if you're using it to generate an information. The other one is contextual understanding. So, and we'll talk today about how you create really solid requests for ChatGPT. We call them prompts that can produce more quality outputs. But generally, if you put something in there and it doesn't have all the context, it might produce the result that might seem out of place. So thinking about, again, how you address that through providing additional context to ChatGPT before making a request. And last one, I want to touch base on data privacy. And so there are some concerns about data privacy. And actually, ChatGPT released an opportunity for teams to collaborate in a more closed loop system. So there is also a workstation that can be only available to the team that's working on it. And then it wouldn't be in a general channel. But there is still some data privacy considerations. So our rule of thumb is not to put any sensitive or personal information that has personal identifiers. But they do have a whole protocol about data privacy and how they store data and how they do not share it with third parties. And also there's a way to opt out from using data to be, to train a machine on that. So one thing that you want to highlight is using this, and I think this hopefully this title will resonate with you, is using this co-pilot versus autopilot. So meaning that you don't just completely give it all and don't just take it as is and not work with this tool. So the idea here is really use it as a thought partner, as a tool to your work. So the way to do it is thinking about what are you comfortable with, what are the roles, where are the part of your tasks where you feel like it can really help you, and at the same time it's a good and safe experiment to use it for. Even the other thing is to make sure you do spot checking, so you can control, the quality of the results. So it's not really replace our abilities or our workforce. It's really to support or augment the skills or abilities that maybe we don't have. Another one is really working with this. So if when it's generating during a recommendation and interactions, again, doing some spot checking and working with it to keep refining. So if it gives you 5 different recommendations and you're not quite sure about the 2 of them, following up with them, challenging ChatGPT or asking them additional follow-up questions so it produces what you really want at the end. And then training education, that's kind of a part of why Erin and I are doing that. We really believe that when we get comfortable with that and experimented this in different areas, we'll be able to generate those lessons learned and become more comfortable with this and being able to generate best practices of using it. So really having that exposure at different levels would be very beneficial. So a couple real life stories coming from several communities, National Association of Counties about a year ago. And you can see here a QR code. If you actually open your phone or your device, and on this QR code, you'll be able to go to the original article that this information is based on. So feel free to do that. You can see it in the left corner of your screen. So the National Association of County officials developed about a year ago is AI Exploratory Committee to use AI. And the goal that they wanted to do that for is knowing that it's really rapidly developing and counties are trying to figure out how to use it, when to use it, and what some guardrails. They're working on the guidance and testing the system for different functions. They also have different vendors that are approaching communities and counties to provide AI services. And so they're also creating the guidelines to help with contract vetting. So to help counties to ask questions, like what do you need to ask a vendor if you want to, procure a closed AI system. One thing that they had a couple considerations and concern they're trying also to address, but they are agree on the fact that AI could be helpful for some county functions to be automated. Next slide. So two counties specifically that featured in that conversation, that's a part of that pilot that we're doing this work, and they're part of that committee that I mentioned from NACO, is in Weber County, Utah, a clerk, an individual who is in the clerk and an auditor position. I think several individuals on this phone call also have a similar position in their career. So what this particular individual suggested they use it for is actually working on the materials such as job descriptions, adding information to job description, revising the job descriptions. They also actually use ChatGPT to turn the documents into something very like do proofreading and also make it more plain. So they run all the public facing documents through ChatGPT so they're more clearly expressed for the community before they make them public. They also use closed loop AI system for account payables, so process as well. And then in the other county, King County, Washington, they also do use ChatGPT they have a diverse county with 6 different groups and languages. So they use it to translate into other languages for the materials that quickly need translation, and they had success with that. And then they use not ChatGPT, but closed AI loop systems that for 2 different reasons. One is they feel the importance of redacting personal identifying information from senior citizens' property tax records because they feel that would allow for security and privacy for senior citizens. And the AI system can do this pretty quickly. So they calculated that they were able to reduce 4,000 hours of manual work by doing that. But what they also make sure that there is a quality assurance throughout the process. So they do spot checking once AI conducts that job. And the other specific task they used it for is actually for CDC reporting specific to categories caused of death and overdoses. So they do it, they were able to really match the reporting format that CDC asked for, so it reduced the labor, but they also were able to do the hotspotting using that, so to identify where actually there were concentration of those deaths due to overdoses as well. So thinking for public health prevention and resource allocation purposes. And one of the things that Erin talked about the federal guidance, and there's some of the conversation there. The Central Disease Control is also using AI for those type of functions to do the hotspotting. So from those particular early adopters that I just talked about for those county and others, they talked about several things that came to their forefront about the importance to think about as we're doing this is if we are using AI experimentation experiments, embedding it into the system to make sure it doesn't interrupt the service delivery in that period of experimentation, that it continues to continue to go. And then there is some concerns about just figuring out how to keep up with private industry, because at the governmental sector, we might not have the full ability to move as fast as the private sector. So how do we do that more effectively? And then also figuring out how to address misinformation and disinformation within the AI models. I mentioned that there might be some information that's not accurate. We'll talk about prompt development. Some things to do there is ask for citations, so you can go and check original source. In the case that AI, in some cases, could create something that didn't exist, a piece of information. So you want to make sure that it's kind of spot check on that. On a kind of upside or optimistic side, I think there is also was a sentiment for those early adopters that even if we need to create regulations, we need to make sure that we don't create them in a way that we cannot continue experimenting. So we have to be really thoughtful that we are creating some of those considerations or boundaries, but we continue to experiment and try them out for different functions.
All right. So as Kim mentioned, keep questions coming in the chat, and we'll try to verbally answer all we can, and we'll chat with you a bit there too. When we think about ChatGPT, and it sounds like a handful of folks on the webinar today have used it, or at least know a little bit about it, the majority of what we like to talk about and train on is prompt development. So what are you actually putting into the system to solicit that feedback and those things back? So my classic example of this, if you go into a restaurant and ask for food, you don't know what you're going to get. You will get food, but you don't know what. You don't know if you're going to like it. So knowing what to ask and how to be specific, make sure that you're going to get a good quality product and response. So when we use ChatGPT, we like to just frame it up in its simplest terms. We use it in 3 ways: to assess and advise on things, to brainstorm, and then to create something new. So we're going to walk through some different examples of what that looks like. But before we get there, we think about prompting. We call it prompt engineering, like coming up with the right way to ask the right thing to get what you want. It really takes a level of critical thinking. So again, you can just ask bluntly for a quick thing and keep it a super simple prompt. But if you really want to dive into it and do follow-up questions, like that's really what we're getting at to try to train people more in having a conversation and being more specific about what you're after. And that really comes from the critical thinking aspect of this, making sure that you are including, because it's just not one question. You can type in whole paragraphs, justifying the reason of what you're after. You can get a response, consider alternatives. You just don't have to go with that one. You can ask it for more. You can request examples if it tells you something and either you don't understand it or you don't know if that's right. Ask more, ask for clarification, challenge any assumption that you have about what it's responding to. And again, just asking for clarifications. What do you mean by that? Why is this? Why did you tell me this when you could have mentioned that? Like actually thinking critically about those responses. Tips for successful response: keep them brief but clear, avoid ambiguity. We say brief, but if you saw some of the prompts I use, I'll do whole paragraphs. Make sure your query and questioning is complete. I get typos don't matter. It's actually really smart at understanding what you're trying to get after. Incorporating specific keywords if you want something and giving it kind of a frame. If you're asking about guidance on something, start with, you are an expert in blank. Then ask your question. Ensuring that prompts are neutral. So you can do leading questions. If you're familiar with doing leading questions, you can do leading prompts and to try to sway it to a response that you want. So don't do that if you're wanting some objective, unbiased responses. And you can always refine your prompts more, asking for more detail, asking it to explain things, asking it for citations and those sorts of things. So these are just kind of a snapshot of these. And if everyone gets a copy of the PowerPoint, you'll be able to refer back to these. So before we get into some of the specific work details, I like to have a lot of fun with ChatGPT. I think it can help you in all aspects of work. So learning prompts. One of my favorite ones is on the top left here. I want to learn about blank, identify and share the most important 20% of learnings from this topic that will help me understand 80% of it. Actually, I have this like saved on my computer so I can grab it and copy every time because that's a lot of words to remember. There's simple things like explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old. You can put in, tell me the theory of relativity and explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old, and you get a much different response. You can ask about common misconceptions about a topic. You can really explore the differences between things. So compare and contrast topic A and B in terms of their impact on whatever. Again, these are just examples. And when it comes to learning things, there are still opportunities for systems like ChatGPT to go a little off and maybe even invent some things. It's getting a lot better at not doing that. I say inventing things like citations of where it's pulling information. So at the end of a prompt, just simply ask for citations. You might check those, but recently everything that we've checked has been coming out true and positive, and you can go back to those original sources. Productivity prompts. So in your day-to-day, this is the type of stuff that I will use ChatGPT for multiple times a day. Draft an agenda for a meeting about X. Our goal is to achieve Y. So again, you can say draft me an agenda for my meeting, but if you add a little bit more detail, you're going to get a much better response. And again, you can give it a role to play. So you are an expert in whatever it might be, give me a recommendation for something. And one of my new favorites, generate a checklist for evaluating something. So in the bottom right corner there, you can also say, what questions should I be asking about something? We really think this is important when you're engaging in new material. The thing I was talking to Tatiana about before, there was an article on the news about watershed policy. I don't know what watershed is. So tell me what watershed is. Use some of these learning prompts. You can say, generate a checklist for evaluating what makes a good watershed policy. So there's ways to kind of shortcut, get productive with understanding some of these things and knowing what questions to ask. Tatiana mentioned proofreading. This is a huge one. You can drop text in it. You can actually drop an email into it and say, respond to this for me. Who knows what it's going to generate? But you can give more prompts to get some of those things out. My favorite thing is to drop something in there and ask questions about it. Is there a chance that this might be taken negatively? How can I clear that up? Get its feedback, ask for help. You can, again, have a conversation with a system like ChatGPT to help elevate your writing or just to look for elements. And you're going to see some of what Tatiana is going to show in a minute of what that looks like in action. And my favorite thing to do, especially on the app on my phone, is to use this regularly. Hey, I've got chicken and broccoli in the fridge. Give me 3 dinner recipes. It'll say chicken and broccoli Alfredo. Great. Actually, give me the recipe. And it'll throw one out. You can play with that more and say, you are a 5-star chef. Now give me a dinner recipe. So you can continually iterate on what you're asking. You can actually ask it to role play, and I've done this a lot recently just to experiment with this, and it does really, really well. You can put half ideas in there, the top right. So what movie am I thinking of? There was something with a pirate and there was a boat that sank. It was fairly new, and it will generate a list of movies for you so you can try to find out what you were thinking about. So I've used it for travel as well, whether you can give it something like, you're a budget travel guru, or you can just simply say, hey, I'm taking a trip from Lawrence to Kansas City. Tell me areas where I might stop to sightsee. And it will have really good and interesting options for you. So again, we really want people to get comfortable with ChatGPT, these types of systems. So when we start applying AI to bigger, more in-depth systems, you have a little bit of comfort of what's happening and why and how.
Thanks, Aaron. So one thing that we do want, so in the next section, what we're going to really focus on is to show you how to use it on specifically updating a document. And specifically, we chose a policy that exists. Let's say we have some document, policy or regulation, and you're working to update it. And how do you decide what updates to make using ChatGPT? With that, I want to make a disclaimer. If you are creating and updating the documents, you should approach with careful oversight and also make sure that it aligns with guidance and best practices in the field. So once ChatGPT suggests you what you can change, you need another set of eyes to make sure that this recommendation is sound. All right, so let's dive in for improvements to specific policy. So we're going to talk about three-pronged approach. So there's multiple ways you can go about updating a particular policy or document. So what I'm going to show you how to do it when first you ask ChatGPT to review and edit it, and specifically request it to make sure it explains each change it suggests. So you can actually read its rationale and make a decision. Is it reasonable or not? Second approach would be after that, using ChatGPT to ask me clarifying questions based on what I should be telling you more, providing this more of additional context so you can give me better results. And actually, the interesting thing, we're going to look at how ChatGPT can ask itself questions about the policy and then actually respond to the same question using the information in the policy. And then third strategy I'm going to show you is then how you use this to update the policy using those answers. All right, so the policy is that I'm sure you maybe all have in your counties or looked at some point. It's about nuisance abatement and abatement of dangerous buildings. And this is actually policy from Linn County. I don't know if anyone on the call is from Linn County. Maybe Erin or Kim will let me know. But generally what that policy is all about is abating nuisances, and it has four main provisions. It authorizes a public officer to investigate nuisances. It makes sure that once they're investigated, the owner can abate the nuisance or required to abate the nuisance. Then it allows to charge the cost of abating to the nuisance to the owner. And then there are some consequences, financial consequences, if those abatement is not done. Next slide. So our first thing is to look, okay, we want to update the policy. We want to make sure that we didn't miss anything when we were creating this, that this policy is not creating any negative consequences in the community. We want to make sure that it's really sound policy. And you can apply this example to any document that you're working with, even if it's a job description, it's a regulation, if, a strategic plan, whatever, document you are working with. So the first prompt you want to do, and that's where it's important to use some of the tip that Erin shared about prompt creation. You want to make sure that your prompt, your request is like how you would, tell someone, and want to make sure that they have all the information they need. So in that particular prompt, you're asking ChatGPT to suggest ways to improve the policy aimed at addressing nuisances at the county level. You want to ensure that ChatGPT makes changes that are evidence-based, and that it provides results by listing original text, the text with proposed changes, and rationale for each change. So you want to have this holistic picture. Next slide. So as you're looking at this and trying to make sense of that slide, I'll kind of walk you through that. So what you see here is a specific section of the policy from nuisance abatement, and it has original text in a regular font, new language in a bold font, and then you have explanation that I highlighted in yellow. So that was the output from ChatGPT. So what I did this after I put this prompt, I copied and pasted policy into the ChatGPT. And then it used my language or my ask in the prompt to generate that response. So for that particular section, right of entry, you can see that the original text talks about that the public officer shall have the right of entry to make inquiry and inspection to determine if there's a nuisance in the building. So ChatGPT actually suggests to provide 24-hour notice to the property owner. So the original policy did not have a notice. And it provides an explanation that it made the suggestion in order to ensure the respect for the property owner's privacy and provide a fair warning, and also hopefully enhance cooperation with compliance if it had that notice. So while looking at this, there will be a decision, made for those who decide to make it. Is it reasonable? Can we do this? Is it possible? But again, it puts this as a consideration. The next example here is, if you can go back real quickly, it actually makes in the second one. It's about impeding or obstructing the public officer. It added additional language that in certain circumstances, when there's like emergency situation, that 24-hour notification can be waived, because it does recognize there might be some circumstances when that needs this urgent action. Next. So I'll kind of continue with that framework just to give you one more example what changes it proposed. So for that section, the section of notice and order, it was about what type of record should be done, what the record should contain when you have a notice to be issued by the public officer. So you can see here that original text included the street address, legal description, and other information. So what ChatGPT suggested for second and third bullet point is also include photographs when applicable for the purpose of referencing specific violation, and also reference specific violation of the county's nuisance code. And it provided the justification that that would increase clarity of what actually was specific violation. It will also help property owners understand the exact nature of the issue. In the next example, it also suggests that a statement of the action required to be taken as determined by the public officer should include a link or attached to the compliance guide in order for them to know what actions they should take and how to take them. Because the rationale for that was that ChatGPT suggested that making it easier for property owner to rectify issues. Right? So we went through the first stage where it's looked at the original policy and used that prompt to provide suggestions and rationale for each suggestion. So the next thing we can do is ask, thinking about what maybe we still missed something. So one way that ChatGPT works well, if you ask it to create clarifying questions based on the policy. So your next prompt will be review this policy. It generates a list of clarifying questions about the policy. And next, use the policy language to provide answers to those questions. So you can actually do it yourself too. You can answer your questions and paste them in. But the shortcut would be for that to analyze the information in the policy and answer its own questions. So based on that, it's generated more than 5 questions, but I selected 5 questions. So it wanted some additional information or clarifying that it felt like it can then provide additional ideas how to improve policy. And so the 2 questions, for example, here it asked, does the policy ensure fair treatment? And include provisions for those who might struggle to comply due to financial hardships. And it's possibly addressed that question because I did not find that section in the policy. That's why it's generated that question. And then the next question was also about what measures and educational initiatives are in place to prevent nuisances in the first place. And again, now looking at the result that produced, I think it asked all of those questions because this information were not either fully described in the policy or was missing. So next slide. So what did it do? I asked it in the prompt, to provide responses. So it analyzed the information in the policy, and then it provided the response that the policy does not explicitly mention provisions for individuals facing hardships, how to comply with abatement. It doesn't talk about, how to access different programs that can help to do that. And then the second question, it talked about that it also doesn't have information about preventive measures. So how do we educate community about educational materials or how to maintain property without nuisances or workshops? So now based on that information, next slide, my next prompt was, based on your responses you provided, include proposed changes to the original language and explain the rationale for the changes. I always want to keep that rationale explanation. So again, I can read it and see if it's sound. So on this slide, you see in the text in the blue is what this original gap was identified in its responses, that it did not explicitly mention provisions for individuals facing financial hardships in the policy, how they're supposed to abate properties. And so based on that, now it created a suggestion that's in yellow. So it says, if you're facing financial difficulties and fixing these issues, please contact for assistance and guidance. So now it's proposing making this change to the policy. So you're not just required to abate it, but we're recognizing there might be some circumstance where people cannot do that. And it provides guidance to those to how to do that. And, it's up to the county. If county has the mechanism, obviously that will be helpful if the county does have programs and can provide the support. If not, that's a different, decision to be made if that can be part of that policy. All right, next slide. So just one more example to that second question. It found a gap in the policy that there was no details about preventive measures, such as educational initiative about nuisance abatement. And so as a result, it proposed to include additional language in the policy. And it says here, original language did not exist about prevention. So I'm proposing to prevent nuisances and keep communities safe, to do workshop, provide resources, support property maintenance, and help really individuals understood how to avoid nuisances in the first place. So that would create, if that's an opportunity to do this for the county, that could be improvement to the policy. Right?
So yeah,
So
thanks,
hopefully I
Tatiana.
provided some example of how you can apply it to other documents, that kind of logic of the prompt creation, and how you can generate additional ideas where you can address some of the gaps in the documents. Back to you, Aaron.
And I think Tatiana's process there highlighted, you can just ask one simple question and run with it. And that's not what we recommend. Going back to, it's a tool. You want to have a conversation, you want to dive deep, you want to like ask for those rationale things. So it goes back to some of that critical thinking when using these prompts. You don't have to do that. You just get much better results and get much more out of the system when you do. So we're going to shift our focus a bit to ethical and responsible AI use. So there are a lot of things coming out in terms of lawsuits, worries, laws. Like there's a lot to wrap our heads around with this new software because it does things that have never been able to be done before. And we don't quite know all the power. And then again, all of the bad things that could come along with it. So we got to put some things in place to make sure we're using it appropriately. So a couple of high level things to be aware of is transparency. So when we're using AI, knowing how decisions are made, when is AI actually involved? So if you were to update the policy that Tatiana just showed, do you want to be transparent in saying that it was modified by AI? We think so, because I think it's important to make this a more regular thing. It shouldn't be any more than just saying, yep, we typed it in Microsoft Word. But there's all the other elements that we'll talk about in the next slide as to why it's important to not only acknowledge it, but think through the implications of using those things. Bias and fairness, we know that bias is something that just happens naturally, therefore it will come into existence with some of the prompts, some of the data that systems are pulling from. Privacy, as Tatiana mentioned, with something like ChatGPT, there are ways to create privacy in terms of these closed loop systems, but if you just open a free account, it kind of goes back to that. If it costs no money, that means like you're the product that's being sold. So it's learning from us if you're using those free accounts. We always say if there's anything you put into a system, like again, the free account of ChatGPT, it'd be the same thing as posting it out on a board somewhere. So if you don't want something to know about medical results or using your mother's name, those sorts of things, like don't put it in that system. So we have to be thinking about privacy and how we're protecting our information. Employment impact, I do know that that's of course a big one in the news, right? Everyone's going to lose their jobs. We like to say that AI is not going to replace jobs. People who use AI are going to be taking those jobs. But we do know that as some things get automated, we're going to have to identify like how is this going to impact society and making sure that we're being transparent about that. AI and society, this element on who takes responsibility for AI decisions is one of the big ones. Decision liability, I'm going to slide on that in a second. We'll dive in a little bit deeper. Full disclosure, I don't think I shared it before. I'm not a lawyer, so we're just going to touch on some of the legal aspects very highly in terms of knowing what to be aware of and what types of questions to ask. Data protections, that AI decision liability, and copywriting. Data protections, regulations, basically, especially we have to be concerned about this working in local government, knowing that there's lots of data, there's lots of personal data. We have to make sure that there are safeguards in place. A lot of times the US is lacking when it comes to some of these things because we are so open market minded. We know that Europe is passing, the EU is passing a lot of laws around data protections and privacy elements, making regulations to say what can and can't be used. We're starting to just see elements of this in the US. So hopefully we get more guidance. And as Tatiana mentioned before, we don't want the restrictions to come in and shut everything down. We want to know how to do this in an ethical, legal way so that we're not going to get in trouble. We're going to know a lot more in the next few years, right? Right now, if you're uncomfortable putting something into the system, that probably means you shouldn't be putting it in. So that's when we start having conversations about these closed loop systems and making sure those safeguards are in place so that we can do that ethically and responsibly. AI decision liability, there's a lot of different examples of what this could mean, but if you were to use AI to help make decisions on whatever that is, you have to remember that there's going to be liability if something goes wrong. So there's a lot of use cases right now where there's, specifically we were looking at some articles about an oncology department. It was part of a hospital. They were using AI to come up with recommendations based off what patients were putting out there. The ultimate decision, according to the hospital, relies in the physician, right? The trained human expert. But what happens if there are individuals who just go with the AI decisions and don't use oversight? So then does the AI system get to be at fault? Does that individual, knowing how these things play out and who has the liability, the responsibility for these decisions is going to be important, because we don't want to create a system where there's a lot of finger pointing and nobody knows who's to blame. So we got to think about these things up front and make sure that we're defining them. If you're following any of the visual generation materials, there's lots of lawsuits out there. There's also some lawsuits because people are writing entire books through systems like ChatGPT, and they're actually using phrases like use this author's voice, so it sounds like something that they would write. So there's a lot of things happening in the copyright world right now, trying to know and understand not just when are we infringing on rights, but how do we respect some of these future elements and make sure people are being compensated for that. So if you're going to use somebody's art as part of that big database that these systems pull from, how can we make sure they're being compensated? So there's a lot to think through. I think we're going to be seeing a lot in this realm. Right now, I would say use visuals very cautiously. And even when it comes to written documents, ask for citations, try to get a good understanding of where this material is coming from. And I'm breezing through some of this. We're getting close to our hour mark. I think one of the most important things is to make sure that we have policies in place to know and address some of the things that I just mentioned. The state of Kansas, through the Office of Information Technology, has a really great policy. So being a state employee through the university, I have to follow this. All state employees have to follow this policy, which is honestly a really good one. There's a lot of things that don't apply to me in terms of like using a system like ChatGPT for coding, like web-based coding. I don't do that. But recognition of generative AI's potential benefits, it leads with that, which I think is fantastic, acknowledges the risks. One of the most important things I think we can do is to continue to emphasize, hopefully we said it enough, this third bullet of making sure that there's human review, human intervention, that somebody is actually providing oversight as to what we're getting out of these systems for accuracy, appropriateness, etc. Treating information as publicly available, avoiding copyright materials, those sorts of things. So this policy, and we can share the link if anyone is interested, but if you actually look it up, Kansas AI policy, and put in Office of Information Technology, you will get it. If you're looking for something for your county to consider, we know that some counties are already implementing these policies. Even though this is a state policy, we've actually heard from a lot of folks at the state that they never knew this existed. So we're making sure to share that as much as we can, making sure that if counties are passing these policies, you're really communicating with staff and other departments what this looks like and what we need to be considering. And again, not shutting it down, but making sure we have safeguards in place. We are starting to see some laws in the US. I mentioned that we had a House bill proposed recently, specifically, maybe you heard about this in the news, specifically around representation, false representation of candidates in terms of election. So that's great. And There's probably more we need to be doing around false representations and how we can put some guidelines around that. So I think this is just the start, right? As we start understanding how people are using these softwares, either for good or maliciously, we need to know and understand what those impacts are. And we're going to be seeing a lot more. And that's something that Tatiana and I are going to continue to put into our presentation. We mentioned the a law that was just passed by the Biden administration in terms of what they're expecting to see out of their federal agencies. So that's great. And we can start to identify that people are kind of using these and either not telling anyone. We got to get away from that. We need to make sure it's out in the open, that we're understanding and having these conversations. With that, when we think about next steps, we have broad discussions. I think this is a great start. We're always happy to come talk to folks or come back to KAC for continued conversations. We recommend starting small. If anyone's working on a big project and you could benefit from doing something like what Tatiana shared in terms of this in-depth review and getting feedback and thinking about things from, you know, a different lens, then like start small, get a couple of folks together and do this as a group. Some of the workshops we've done where a couple people are coming at these prompts in different ways, like this is how we learn and how we can do things better and use this as a really effective tool for collaboration. Ensure information quality. We like to talk about that garbage in, garbage out. The prompting is so important. And I shared with you a couple of like little simple ones, and then Tatiana kind of showed you the Rolls Royce of going through doing some real thinking about how to step through getting the feedback and the recommendations that you want. And again, paying attention to developments, that's huge. And we know that NACO is investing a lot of time and energy into this. So we're keeping track of what they're doing and how other counties are using these systems as well. We have one or two more slides I'm going to skip over so that we can address some of the questions. And since I've been talking, Tatiana, I don't know if you have quick responses to highlight any of the things we've heard from the chat.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I posted some answers to the questions that were prior in the chat. So thank you so much for asking. Hopefully that clarifies some of those questions. And it looks like there's a question about upcoming County Commissioner Association conference in April. So Kim, would you like to provide a response to that?
Yes, and we are exploring. We'd love to hear some feedback if anyone has any quick guidance. This is really a broad general overview, right? Our hope is to make people comfortable with AI, cautious with AI, and excited about AI. So hopefully you've got a little bit of that today. We also know that people if you've never used the system, some of the stuff we shared might be a little fuzzy. We really want to do some workshops. And so we've been talking about doing a little bit of workshopping at that County Commission Association conference in April. So we really want to get them using it hands-on.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying this, Aaron. I quickly misread the question, so that's why I kind of put Kim on the spot because I thought they were just asking more general when the conference is. But yes, to that point of Aaron was mentioning, we will plan to do more hands-on because it's going to be in the workshop style. But some information probably would be similar, or maybe we'll expand to some other examples of job descriptions and other pieces just to show a different utility of. But if you have a specific request or specific hope for what you would like to hear, please put in the chat or communicate it to Kim so we can we can explore if we can make it happen.
Yeah, and going back to the questions of Christy and Carrie earlier, just to reiterate and be clear with ChatGPT, it's language, right? So it's those prompts and those conversations. And I tell you, I have conversations with this software because that's how you get the information you want. No, I don't like that. Why would you say that? Like, ask it questions and get clarification. When it comes to automated systems, I think every system that we touch is going to have AI in it in the next 5 years. And I think it's going to be quick. So when you are looking at something that can scan documents, read it, make either sense of it or just to pull out information, that's not ChatGPT, right? That is going to be another type of system that knows and understands how to look at those visuals and pull things out of it. Somebody mentioned something about, sorry, there was a really good example when we started the chat. What was it? Utilizing Placer AI to assist with commercial real estate opportunities. So I don't know what that is. I've never heard of it. I'm going to go look it up because I think that's a good example of, like, we can look at a map, we can figure out some of these things, but those types of softwares are going to be coming, and anything that we use is going to start having that capability to take visual, make sense of things, give recommendations. So like we're trying to make sure everyone has a good handle of what's coming, because we don't even know what's coming, because I think the innovative uses, they're really going to start to present themselves in the next year or two.
Okay.
Any additional questions or things we didn't answer?
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody, if you've got some questions or some comments, now's a good time to put them right in that old chat box, and let's see if we can get them addressed. You guys have had great questions during this session, and wow, that's awesome to see, because this AI is going to touch every department in a county in different ways. It's not just the little customer service bot that says, okay, you need to call here. This is like real stuff that's, as Aaron and Tatiana have just showed us, can dig into so many of the documents and things within the counties. Okay. There you go. You got great session. Thanks for hosting this topic, Aaron and Tatiana. And yes, I agree, Shane. The bad part of being a meeting planner or a conference or an event coordinator, all those titles, I never get to enjoy the actual sessions. So Aaron and Tatiana, this was awesome. I mean, it's my first, so I really appreciate this presentation. Was spot on. Just amazing ideas. I like the point of digging in, because yes, that is critical, is digging into, really get it to understand you. Because one thing I learned this week from the Tuesday session, the more data that gets in, the more these AI software programs learn. And just like you pointed out, on the flip side, just be very cognizant of the information you're feeding these systems, because that does become public knowledge when you feed it. So you've got to consider that too.
And just something to clarify, so the information, first of all, the ChatGPT has an option to opt out from any data training. And so there's this place there that says don't use my data for training the machine learning, and then it doesn't retain the data. So it is on the server. So it uses the architects behind that. They look at the data and they figure out what they could have improved to do the prompt if you didn't opt out, but they don't retain the data and it doesn't live in the system. And they kind of explain that data privacy. So the warnings are of not using sensitive data is because we are still learning of the capabilities. But technically, the way that OpenAI and other AI describe that it doesn't retain the data and it doesn't live in the system.
Thank you for clarifying on that, because we did hear there's differences too between the different AI tools. So you've got to kind of generically look at them as well. If anybody wants to learn more about AI, you might let us know here at KAC, because yes, definitely this is one of those evolving technologies that's going to be changing constantly. It will be. And Aaron and Tatiana both are, deep in the weeds on it already, which is amazing and awesome. And I appreciate that. And you did bring it down, I think, to our level. So I appreciate that too, like where we can really see, and you gave the hands-on. And for those commissioners that are on, look forward to your session at the Kansas County Commissioners Conference in April, which will be at the Kansas Crossing Casino. That's coming up the 16th through the 18th. So be sure to, if you haven't registered, get that done. Also, Tatiana and Aaron, you betcha you're going to be right back on that calendar with us, if that's okay with you, on updates for AI. We really would love to keep this going. Probably another session at the conference too, I think, is what we'll look forward to in December. So keep that in mind, especially since, well, Tatiana, it's not in your backyard, but Erin, it's in your backyard. But I know, Tatiana, you probably like road trips too. Uh, so yeah, so we'll plan for that. Also, I wanted to let y'all know before you jump off the call that our April 25th Connecting Kansas Communicators session is called Enhancing County Preparedness with a Cart. That's spelled like a shopping cart, but it's not about shopping carts. And we're going to actually introduce Brandy the horse. So stay tuned. What the cart is about, I better give you a little bit more of a hint, is we will discuss how Butler County has used a county animal response team to meet state and federal planning requirements for companion animals in disasters. Additionally, the presenters will touch on how the team mission has been expanded to assist in smaller scale events, such as large animal rescues. And so this is a 2-presenter presentation. So we're going to have both a county look and we're going to have a state discussion about this cart. And you also get to learn more about Brandy the horse. This is why social media is amazing. If you ever doubt if it's not useful, it is. Trust me. In my role here, sitting in my chair, because I saw Brandy the horse, I learned a whole component about something involving kind of the emergency management side and the animal side and how this all ties together, and that there is a need across Kansas and the counties for the cart. So we will talk about that more in detail. I'll get information out on that for April. And Erin and Tatiana, again, I just applause, because AI is both scary and amazing. And it is showing up in everything we're doing. Like as I mentioned, I had a friend who didn't even understand what AI was until I talked about a Facebook post. And then she's like, oh, you mean, is it that thing where they annoy me and want to fix my issues and shorten or rewrite and I said, yes, that is an example of AI. And she's like, oh, okay, I get it. So it's going to be, in the days and months ahead, it's going to be interesting to see where we start seeing more of this and how it does impact our jobs and impact, every level of government, from, local to state to federal. So with that, did we get another? No,
Kim, I just put a little bit more information about how it uses data to train and what the implications are for data privacy, just to provide additional context for the conversation we were having.
Awesome, because that is important. I think that's to understand when you say something to it, what is it? And so I appreciate that. Thank you, Tatiana, very much for sharing that. And with that, I think I want to wish everybody here from KAC and in the Kansas counties, and Erin and Tatiana, I want to wish you all a happy Good Friday and a wonderful Easter weekend. We look forward to having you both on again and possibly seeing you. Well, we'll see you in person soon too. So that's a plus. I forgot. That'll be great. Okay. Well, with that, everyone, please have a great afternoon and have a wonderful holiday weekend. And we'll see you on next month on April 25th. And again, as I mentioned, this will be this information, the presentation and the recording link will be shared with you in tomorrow's Kansas County Happenings e-newsletter. So stay tuned. It will arrive to your inbox soon. Have a great afternoon and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.